We have achieved great things. We have made giant leaps. We've gone far beyond what we thought was possible. But we have only just begun. Our future in space is unlimited, and it will benefit all humanity. But it will take hard work, new technologies, advanced financing models, and enabling public policy. The Beyond Earth Institute is creating a policy and legal framework to enable the creation of economically vibrant communities beyond Earth. We will engage all stakeholders on critical policy issues: property rights in space, norms of behavior, conflict resolution protocols, filling the technology gaps, exploring new financing mechanisms, and making space settlement an agreed goal of the U.S. and its allies. Beyond Earth is committed to the true purpose of why we go to space. Join us on this journey.
Welcome to this Beyond Earth Institute webinar. My name is Steve Wolfe. I'm the president of Beyond Earth, and I couldn't be more excited about today's program entitled In Dialogue with the Space Evangelists. But before we get into the program, I just have a couple of things I want to share with you. First off, I want to acknowledge someone who just passed that I was made aware of. Actually, Frank White made me aware of this, that David Chevron has passed away over the weekend. If those of you who know him, he's probably one of the quiet space evangelists out there. Career NASA engineer, space entrepreneur, and space activist throughout his whole life. He certainly will be missed. And as I said on the last webinar that we had, this is really, I felt, an opportunity for us to take a step back from our busy lives. Many of us here are actively involved in the space arena one way or the other. Some of you are citizens that are just very interested, but I'm always amazed at how many people are from industry, from academia, from government, from internationally that are tuning in to our programs. And this is a particularly special one. For those of you who are familiar with my book, The Obligation, you know that I have a particular take on why it is humanity is so motivated to develop the capability to expand beyond Earth and live and work in space permanently. I don't see this as something that we as human beings are deciding to do necessarily. It's not something that it's logical or rational, although you can talk about space migration in logical and rational terms. I've come to the belief that humanity is part of a much larger system, larger biological process that literally has been going on since the very dawn of humankind's existence. The way I see it, humanity, came into existence here with the particular faculties and capabilities and endowments that we have for the express purpose so that we would one day leave this planet and have, with those capabilities, leave this planet. So we see it as a biological process almost of a planet that, or could say the biosphere, is able to replicate itself or to reproduce itself beyond this one planet. So it's in this vein, creating a context, and I think this is really what it's about, whether or not you really kind of buy into the particular perspective that I personally am presenting. The more that we can create a bigger context as to why we go to space, I think that helps us individually become more motivated to do the day-to-day work that it takes. Each one of my panelists here, in one way or another, they're not just sitting on they're not just sitting up in the mountaintops, dispensing wisdom. Each one of them in their own way are doing the hard work, the day-to-day work to making this future come about. And I think that's really what it really is all about. And so this is our time for you to maybe gain some inspiration, become somewhat more motivated so that you can go back to your offices and your various work environments and be that much more enthused about what you're doing and why it's so important. So with that, I couldn't be more excited again to have this group of individuals here on this program, and let's just get into it if we can. I'm going to first just read off the names of the speakers, then I'll introduce them individually as they begin to talk, and then we'll get into this. First is Loretta Hidalgo Whitesides. She's the founder of Yuri's Night and Space Kind, and author of the new Right Stuff, great book. Then there's Frank White. He's the author of The Overview Effect, and he also runs the Human Space Program organization. Rick Tumlinson is the founder of Earthlight Foundation and author of a book that just came out, Why Space? The Purpose of People. And then there is Samantha Tauber, who's a creative polymath, a visionary and author of Galactissance, like Renaissance, but Galactissance, and Da Vinci Awakening. Although you'll have to tell us, I think did you rename the book? You'll have to tell us about that. I'm sorry, I just missed that. And then, of course, Courtney Stadd, great friend of the Beyond Earth Institute, is the executive vice president of the Beyond Earth Institute. Anyway, I'll introduce these folks individually as we go along. But to start us off, I want to pose a general question and then give the folks 5 minutes or so to expound on this. So really is as you are evangelists, each of you, I would like to start the program by giving each of you 5 minutes or so to make your best case for why humanity must move beyond Earth. So with that, we're actually going to, the order of this will be from the youngest to the more seasoned, let's say, of the group. So with that, why don't we bring on Samantha Tauber? So here's Samantha. Samantha, I've had a chance to get to know Samantha earlier this year. I was on a panel with her in Indianapolis. It was, and I was really kind of blown away by the maturity of her voice. There's something called an old soul, even though she's a young person. She really understands what this wisdom, and so with that, I'll leave it to you, Samantha. Take the floor.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm very honored to be here amongst such an esteemed group of panelists, but also everyone attending this webinar. I'm sure we all have our reasons for why space. And Steve, congratulations on your book, The Obligation. I'll always treasure the front note saying thank you for being a conscious evolver. And until I read your book, I fully understood that. But it really does, I think, capture the essence of why space, for why I'm here as Samantha Tauber, but also known as Vinci. So for those of you that don't know, Vinci is my alter ego fiction character inspired by Leonardo da Vinci, the name, but spelled VNCCII. And she's a fictional celestial ally for humanity's next evolution, which is, I suppose, is quite fitting for Beyond Earth Institute and space, because Vinci became a muse creatively for me to think about the future and where we'll be as a human species, and also to do a new form of ROI. We have ROI, return of investment, in the space industry, but I really stand by return of imagination or return of inspiration. And that is the nucleus of my why for space, why for space exploration, space settlements, etc. Because at the end of the day, when you see the world through the lens of being a conscious evolver, we really come to the realization that we're one human family on spaceship Earth, which has led me down this beautiful journey to meeting Frank White, and gratitude as well to the Interstellar Foundation. I think we have Walter here in the chat here, who's the executive director. I'm representing as an artist in residence at the Interstellar Foundation, which was inspired by the original Golden Record to Space and preserving humanity's legacy and our essence. So Frank White generously wrote the foreword for my book, which Steve was trying to pronounce earlier, but I'm actually renaming it to VNCCII, The Awakening of a Divine Warrior. And it's book one of the Galactic series, which is a three-part science fiction series. The name Galactic was inspired by a galaxy, AI, but I also question whether it's artificial intelligence or authentic intelligence, and Renaissance, which is fitting to the time of Leonardo da Vinci and the Age of Enlightenment and the Renaissance. So that is the creative venture and project. But really, I believe that space is for everyone. It's in the cosmos and it's within ourselves. We have space exploration, but we also have space imploration. So we are creating a community of explorers where technology amplifies our imagination, and every voice on Earth and beyond is heard in the harmony of our shared evolution. So I'll leave it there, but I just wanted to say that humanity is really in this stage of the chrysalis, if you liken it to the metaphor of the caterpillar and the chrysalis emerging to a butterfly. And it's a very sacred time in the sense that we need to balance between the pragmatic but the optimism, right? And so that's where my project sits, VNCCII. It's pragmatic optimism for the future, because as we venture beyond, whether it's lunar colonies, Mars settlements, O'Neill colonies and beyond, we need to be able to work together functionally as a human species and see the world through the lens of collaboration or co-opetition rather than competition. And we're seeing examples of this recently as well, in terms of astronauts and the need for collaboration. So it really is a prototype community of tomorrow. And part of my why of how I got into this, I was inspired by Epcot, would you believe, and the concept that Imagineering can be a job. Imagination and engineering equals Imagineering. So Epcot, experimental prototype community of tomorrow, carrying the torch here of, I suppose, Walt Disney, is what I'm trying to do with my contribution through the lens of creativity. And I really believe, our thoughts create our reality. Imagination is really powerful and it can be overlooked, especially in STEM and the space industry. So I'm advocating for STEAM, which is the art part of the equation, because there is a science to art and there is an art to science. And that is exactly what Leonardo da Vinci was doing, in the sense of, the Vitruvian man or woman, let's say, and the true reason for the why, like the quintessential why for the nature of being. And it's a seeker's exploration, but it's a beautiful one, and we're all aboard this planet together. So I think in light of what you're saying, Steve, of the different roles, right? We have inventors, we have builders, we have protectors. They all carry sacred roles, but we also have visionaries, people building companies and bringing it into tangible manifestation. And we have conscious evolvers, which I suppose is also the realm of the imagination. But part of my role is also to bring it into reality. So I'm bridging the worlds of the seen and the unseen. And I'm very happy and honored to be here. So thank you for bringing me aboard.
Thank you, Samantha. Or I probably should say Vinci. I love the metaphor of the butterfly, in the chrysalis, because we're familiar with the vaginal cells that are competing with the caterpillar cells that eventually went out and become the butterfly. So we're very much, I think, in that period of time as we look to expand beyond Earth. I want to now turn to Loretta and Loretta Whitesides. She made it in the house. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. So Loretta is someone I've gotten to know over, the last 10 years or so, and she's just been an inspiration to me. And I love what she has to say, and she's clearly one of the important voices of our generation. So Loretta, with that, I'll let you take the floor.
Well, thank you, Steve. And it's just so delightful to pop into this room and see so many amazing humans that I love. Thanks you for being here. It's perfect because it got me present to space is a calling. And one of the things that I've always felt for myself is that I'm called to space. People are like, "Oh, when did you get interested in space?" And my reaction has always been sort of like, "Well, I was sort of born this way." It's been here since before I can remember. There are pictures of me at Kennedy Space Center pre-memory, like all excited about space. 5 years old. I don't remember. Anyway, but and I think a lot of us here, I mean, I think that's why you came, like moths to flame, like you saw Space Evangelists and you saw all your favorite space people and you're like, "Oh, let's go. That's me. That's where I need to be this morning." And that's part of what I think is so powerful about space. I feel like space people, I think we're a community, and well, we are. One of the things that unites us, though, is our ability to think on, I usually say planetary scales, but what popped in my head was galactic scales. We think on galactic scales. But certainly we think on planetary scales. Like it's just natural for us to just think about things on a planetary scale. So other people think on things like, the crosstown rivalry, or the Northern California, Southern California rivalry, or, the LA Dodgers, Montreal Blue Jays rivalry, like whatever, like we have our different tribes or, factions. But like, I think a lot of us space people, what's beautiful about us is we think on a planetary scale, and we also think on a different time scale than most people. Other people are thinking on a 9 to 5 scale, a quarterly profit scale, midterm election scale. But I feel like our community, we think naturally like on a 100-year time scale. We're like, well, yeah, maybe in 100 years, that's what we'll be doing on, in the solar system. That's our time horizon. That's just that's how life occurs for us. And I think that's all really beautiful. And so one of the things that's really important to me is bringing together our community, and trust is one of the things I wanted to bring to us this morning, is that commonality, that having this calling in common. Brings us together and as like helps us to build trust. Like, "Oh, Courtney, you're into this too?" Like, "Yeah, I'm with you. Like we're in this together. Yeah, you and me." It makes a connection. And that trust is super important for what we want to do going forward. When I grew up in the 80s and 90s, that we were always told it was an information economy. Like it's an information economy. And now, information is becoming really abundant and really inexpensive and really readily available at your fingertips, amazing amounts of data. But trust is much more scarce. And so that's a real gift that we have, is that ability to make trust between us. And so anyway, so we're driven to space. Okay, so why are we driven to space? So one answer is, I don't know why we're like I'm a lemming. I'm like drawn to the cliff or something. I don't know. I'm drawn to it, but I think I choose to believe that there must be a reason, like that we're drawn to this. There's got to be something going in here somewhere. And many years I believed that it was there's something, that the challenge of doing something hard, like figuring out how to be self-sustaining off planet. I'm an astrobiologist by training. I wanted to learn how to grow the quinoa and have the fish swimming in the hydroponic system, and cleaning our air and our water. That the challenge of learning how to live technologically off world, independently, sustainably, but also, now as I'm talking, like also sociologically, like how do we get 10,000 people to get along? How do we get 1 million people to get along off planet? Like where the stakes are higher, where any one of us could just, make a hole in the side of the space station or the L1, city, and kill everyone. So we have to elevate not only our technology, but also like our software, our systems, our internal human systems and our interpersonal human systems. That technology is not advancing quite at the Moore's law yet. So that's what I'm interested in. And the work I do at Spacekind Training is looking at like, okay, how do we get our wisdom to catch up with our intelligence and our technology? So having us rise to that challenge I thought was a really big part of why we're drawn to that. Like that maybe that will call us forth and us to evolve as a species. I found Frank White's, first edition of his book on the library shelf in college, back before pre-web browser days when I started college. I love being old. It's called Space Exploration, the Overview Effect, Space Exploration and Human Evolution. And I was just like, whoa, that is so cool. And so for me, that's a big part of this. Like, I was like, yes, human evolution. Like, how do we get beyond? How do we grow? How do we become better? Not like get a tail or, blue skin or something or new sense perception, but like, how do we become a better species? So that's a big part of it. And then now as time's going by and we're starting to worry about our home planet, which is my favorite planet. I mean, the more you know about the galaxy and the 5,000, planets we've confirmed, the more you're like, God, this one's really good. I think we should take care of it. And it's starting to think like, oh gosh, maybe we're all drawn like moths to flame to space because maybe there's something about what we can do, what we know how to do, our know-how that can help protect our home world, like, with Planet Labs, looking down on Earth and, measuring it and learning how to protect it. But, also maybe, like in Carl Sagan, like discovering the greenhouse effect by studying Venus, being like, oh gosh, that planet sure is heating up pretty good. And being like, oh, maybe we should think about that for our Earth, so like all these things, I think there's the things that we are learning just by going and putting satellites out there that may be the ones who are called upon and needed to protect our very precious home.
That's beautiful, Loretta. Thank you so much. I love the idea that, that maybe we need to, it's just not the technology that needs to be leveled up, but maybe, our consciousness needs to be leveled up as we, really make plans to move off this planet. So thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to bring in Courtney Stadd to go next. I'm putting you right in the middle of the pack here because you're a different kind of an evangelist than the other folks in that your evangelism is very much one-to-one, behind the scenes. You're the one amongst all of us that have worked in the trenches, worked for administrations, worked for NASA administrators, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Transportation. You have seen the whole evolution of commercial space development, but all along the way, I think you have been injecting our vision with folks in a way that none of us on this call really could have or have done. And so for that, you are indeed a true evangelist. So I'll give you, with that introduction, I'll give you the floor for 5 minutes.
You're too kind. And I, as some people have mentioned in the chat, Samantha, just awesome, and Loretta, so inspiring. And in fact, Loretta, I believe you founded Yuri's Night. Am I right about that? That was an extraordinary thing to do. And I think you were, name it after a cosmonaut, right? At that time, it was a very, very powerful message you were sending about the humanity in space. So I can only echo the eloquence of the last couple of speakers and can only anticipate what Frank and Rick are about. And I want to thank Rick. I've never publicly thanked Rick Tumlinson, but during the what can only be called a blood sport, he on the outside, me struggling on the inside of the system to break apart the stranglehold that the federal government had on entrepreneurship in space. He very kindly, the Space Frontier Foundation kindly acknowledged my efforts. I think, Rick, about 20, 25 years ago. So want to thank you. That was quite a morale boost at the time when it was really, really needed. A reminder to all of us that the cosmos has been a canvas upon which humanity has written its imagination from way back. I did a real quick Google search to see when what the first sort of poetry goes back to 1200 BCE, if you could imagine, in India, ancient India. In our civilization, Western, you go back to 800, 700 BCE, and there are some very eloquent poetry that captures in a relatively short few lines the majesty and the mystery of the cosmos. So it's been something that's been intertwined with our species for forever, almost from the beginning of civilization as we know it. And for me, I was inspired by some of the greats. When I was a kid, John Glenn, who a number of us have had the honor of meeting, the late John Glenn is so charismatic, and for some reason, it was something about the guy and his first mission in Mercury around the Earth that really triggered something in me. It's the first thing I wrote, in fact, that got published when I was 8 years old. Was inspired by John Glenn, and there've been many, many, many others along the way. And I ended up working at the Space Institute right out of college that became the National Space Society, and was inspired by the Wernher von Braun peers, many of the NASA Apollo era. And I had an honor of meeting a number of the folks that were instrumental to the landing on the moon, including the wonderful, irrepressible Buzz Aldrin, who introduced me to this concept of a magnificent desolation. As Loretta was speaking, I was reminded of Carl Sagan, and who hasn't been impacted by Sagan. He is on a long line of, as Samantha was mentioning, of scientists who were married to poetry. And some of the great natural philosophers of history, including the great Herschel and his sister, the great astronomer in the Royal British Society, wrote some fantastic poetry. And although Dr. Sagan wasn't known for poetry, if you've read his books, his narration of the Great Cosmos, the first series, is very much poetry. And I remember one of his famous quotes, and I have it here: "Look again at that dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, lived out their lives on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam." And that was just a beautiful piece of, I'll call it poetry. And then Carl Sandburg wrote a poem back in the early 20s that had a big influence on me. And it says, "I am the infinite silence," talking about the cosmos, "that makes men," 1920s, you said men and women, "tremble to their bones. I am the deep blue beyond the stars where the traveler must go." I spend most of my life buried with companies and balance sheets and P&Ls and so forth, from in-orbit servicing to launch companies to telecommunications, you name it. And that's sort of where my bread and butter is sort of helping to build the building blocks that ultimately lead to the ecosystem that ultimately, hopefully, will capture what you're about to hear from Rick, and I've already heard from Loretta and Samantha, and of course from Frank in a couple of minutes. I'm so glad I've lived long enough for this era. When I first got into space almost 50 years ago, it was a desert. There were just a few of us. Many of my peers are dead, many of them retired, but to have lived long enough to see this incredible, robust dynamic of innovation is absolutely fantastic. Many will fail, many will bankrupt, but out of this dynamic, this innovative and entrepreneurial genius, I'm absolutely convinced we will ultimately tap the resources of the cosmos. One final comment, Steve, and Loretta made reference to evolution. We've only been on the Earth a very short period of time. And arguably this brain, this 3.5, 4.5 pound gland sort of got ahead of the physiology, and gravity, wreaks its ravages, but we're still evolving. And I think the wonderful thing about space is that because of the harsh environment and challenges, it really is forcing us and needs it to work together in a way that hopefully the best, and I say this even in my old age, cynical about sometimes the behaviors of our fellow species, but hopefully will lead to the best of us. And Loretta, you're so right. There's sometimes I sit on the subway and I feel sorry for people who are not gifted with the worlds that we all get paid in some cases or volunteer to work with. And Steve, it's been a real honor to sort of be part of your vision. You've brought me into it. I used to think my obligation was to pay my rent, but you've convinced me that there's a far greater one. So with that, I'll turn it back.
Yeah, Courtney, thank you so much. And I don't say enough. I certainly don't say it enough publicly, but you've been such an important pillar of the success of the Beyond Earth Institute. Thank you for walking with us. And I think the entire commercial space community, as you just described it, owes a great debt to the work that you have done over the decades.
You're very kind. But
Thank you. Great. And I'm so glad that you're part of this conversation. And thank you for that. Of course, we all remember.
Thank you.
We all remember Carl Sagan back in the 80s, and he did his bit, walking the halls of Congress and lobbying and all that. So, indeed. So with that, let me now, Rick, Rick, you get. I'll let you go before Frank. Rick, I have known for over 40 years. We are brothers in every which way you can imagine. He and I definitely have a Vulcan mind meld on all issues having to do with human migration beyond Earth. And so it's been an honor, Rick, all these years, and I've always and he has inspired many people with his passion in his words. And I know with your new book, Rick, you're going to reach a whole new audience, I expect. So congratulations on that. So with that, Rick, I'll let you answer the question of why it is we should be going into space and creating space colonies and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I've got nothing. No. I like Samantha, I have an alter ego named Rocket Rick, and he reflects my 17-year-old inner being and actually has hair. But I'm actually going to maybe go out and create that, But oh man, where to begin, right? You guys have done such a fantastic job so far, laying it all out. Steve, first of all, I will thank you. We talked about this in the pre-meeting, but you taught me DC, and you don't get enough credit for the fact that in 1988, you, working with your boss, George Brown, actually passed a law where it was the law of the United States to expand into space. And our community blew it. We didn't hold the feet to the fire. It was gotten rid of during the Paperwork Reduction Act a few years later. But for a glorious couple of years, it was the law of the United States that the goal of our human space program was to develop and settle space. And if it has been in the past, it can be again, right? And let's for anybody out there as an activist side to them, please jump on that. Frank and my good friend Greg Autry spoke at my reading at the Hole in the Wall here in Austin. And we're both, in a sense, poking me afterwards and pointing out that probably for the next year, everything I say is going to end with, it's in the book. So somebody asked me where the lettuce is in the grocery store, I'm going to be like, it's in the book. But I wrote this book because of delving into trying to find that answer of why space. And I talk in the book about the fact that we have our basic answers. And, I live here in Texas, and, I actually went through this phase with my parents of trying to convince them to let me get a pickup truck. And the whole thing was, I can help dad with the chores, and I can help mom do this, and I can do this, and I can do this and do this. Really what I was after was freedom. I was after a symbol of maturity. I was probably after something that would attract, the ladies, whatever. But I had all these rationales lined up. And that's what we do in our community. We can get resources in space, and we can get energy from space, and it's strategic, and it's, we can send people up there, and they can go up and get the overview effect, all of these different things, right? And really, it's about so much more, something so absolutely magnificently huge that we can't even manifest it in terms of trying to explain it to our fellow human beings. And it goes back to what Loretta was saying. It's in here. We go because there is something in us that is connected to that great out there that calls us out, that draws us out to it, that it is the purpose of people. That's the title of the book. I mean, it is why we exist. You said that at the beginning, Steve. I believe that is why we are here. We are, some might call it the seed carriers of Gaia. We are, my personal, and I'll mix these up just to screw with people, my personal crusade and jihad is for life. I am a warrior for life. My goal is butterflies on the moon, trees on Mars. Any place that is dead is blossoming with life. Any place that hasn't been seen has been seen by sentient eyes, and questions have been asked about it. It has either been enjoyed, avoided, whatever it is. I come from curiosity. I come from wanting to understand and know and celebrate this amazing biosphere that we're part of. God, I hate to keep referring to the book, but at one point in the book, I ask people to imagine that there is no ET. And when I do this on stage, when I'm speaking, you can almost hear the rebellion. It's like, if we were in the 1400s saying, imagine there's no angels, I say there's no ET, there's no aliens out there. Crazy hair guy on Discovery Channel is completely wrong. There is no secret freezer and, all of that stuff. None of it. Just imagine that for a moment. It is so freaking hard for us to do, which probably deeply ties into another reason that we're part of the universe and need to go out into it. But imagine that for a moment, and then think about how precious every living thing around you is, how precious that neighbor who pisses you off is, how precious that person who cut you off, how precious that other person in the other party is, how precious everybody everywhere on this planet is, because we are unique. It is that Carl Sagan mote of dust, and we may be the only mote of dust out there. And I hope we're not. And I really want ET to be out there, and I want Crazy Hair Guy to be right, and all of that. But what if we're alone? What if we're it? What if we're the only mechanism by which the universe knows of itself? What if we are the only way that life can celebrate itself in a conscious manner rather than just living and dying? That's a magnificent and incredible thing for humanity to be. Can you imagine a society that is based on those principles rather than how many Teslas are in my driveway? How many likes am I getting? Right? How good do I look? Whatever it is. And we get to this point of saying, you know what? And again, imagine a child being born into a society that is living in the place of complete discovery all the time. I have a picture, and I'll shut up here in a moment. I have a picture of my daughter that I use in my deck, and she's embarrassed by it now because she's 13. I have a picture of her touching a living flower for the first time in her life. Think about that for a second, right? She didn't know the import of that at the moment, but moving into that place where you're constantly on the edge, you're constantly in the unknown zone, constantly growing, constantly expanding. I am not a space person. I could care less. I am not a rocket person. I could care less. Yes, I was a venture capitalist, blah, blah, blah. I could care less. I am a celebrator of life. and sentience and beauty and joy and all of the things that these weird, goofy, apes with guns and rockets that we call humanity do. That's what I'm about. That's who I am for. And so my stand is that it is our job to go out and see, touch, taste, feel everything in the universe and go out there and grow humanity into what we can be and to protect the mother world and carry our seeds wherever we can. That's it. And having people like the other people on this call and yourself as allies, and I'm so glad you guys had this session because we need a lot more of it. Each one of us speaks to a different audience, a different kind of people who have a different kind of listening. And that's fantastic. And we need more of that. We need more Vinci's and Samantha's and Courtney hitting the halls and everybody who's on this call who maybe will go out and carry this message to someone else. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Rick. And I know that you're also going to give a call out to everyone who's listening in to be their own evangelist in some way or another. Rick, you never cease to you never cease to not deliver. I mean, and I'll remind folks that your not only is one of your nicknames Rocket Rick, but your other nickname is Reverend Rick, and that's what you were bringing here today, man. Hallelujah, brother. So I love it. So,
now we're going to try and take us into the nice, quiet softness of it all.
No. And now to round this out, Frank White, I will just say I met Frank when he first when his book first came out, and there was a special presentation in Washington that was it was a screening of The Day the Earth Stood Still, and following that screening, Frank and our other good friend Charlie Walker, who's a former astronaut, were in conversation. I went up to Frank afterwards, and he was kind enough to sign the book for me, which I still have, which is falling apart, and it's dog-eared and footnoted and underlined and highlighted. I mean, that was my Bible for many years, well, still is. So Frank, the Overview Effect was a treasure and a gift to the world. And you keep on, and you're still at it, and and so with that, not that you're the oldest person on this call, I don't know who the oldest person is, but I want to give you the final word.
Wow, thank you, Steve. After listening to Reverend Rick, I feel like I should say, can I get an amen? Brothers and sisters, amen. Yes. Now, to go in a really different religious direction, if you ask a Zen master, Master, what is enlightenment? They will say, it is beyond words, right? And yet every Zen master I know has written a book or is writing a book. And I think the essence of what we're saying here is what draws us off of Earth is beyond words. It's an experience, it's a feeling, it's something bigger than ourselves. And yet everyone here has written a book. And they all kind of say the same thing, really, that we are drawn to something that we don't fully understand. And also, like Zen, I think we have to keep asking why space every day. Why? Because there are other things that we can do with our resources and other things we can do with ourselves. So why? And that's like a Zen koan, which is a challenge to the rational mind to help you achieve enlightenment. And so I will give you a couple of answers. Having told you it's beyond words, I will use words. So first of all, I'm going to tell you a story. When my son Josh was in daycare, I was invited to give a talk there about living in space. And so I went, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, what a great audience. I told them just what Rick was talking about, space stations, being on the moon, et cetera, et cetera. At the end, I said, now, who wants to live in space? Every hand went up, except Masaki. Masaki, what's up, man? But Mr. White, we are in space. So why space? We're in space. We've always been in space. We'll always be in space. Space is our environment as planetary beings. And those of us at the Human Space Program, we would assert that there are space-bound environmentalists and earth-bound environmentalists. We're all environmentalists. It's just, what do we consider our environment to be? 99% of all species that have ever arisen on Earth have gone extinct. Why? They didn't understand their environment. So why space? It's our environment. We want to survive. We want to evolve, as Loretta talked about. We want to go from being a caterpillar to being a butterfly. So that's one answer. My second answer, and it's the one I'm really qualified to give, is the overview effect. The overview effect is seeing the Earth from a distance, from space and in space. It is the image behind me. It is seeing our world in a different way. And, you know, a lot of the question of why space is, you know, when there's so many problems on the Earth. And there's a famous statement by some wise person that was, you can't solve a problem at the level at which it was created, right? So the overview effect, which only happened because some people felt compelled to leave the planet. And incidentally, we don't go into space, we leave the planet because we're already in space. But, you know, we only have the overview effect because of that, and it was an accident. It was the serendipity of exploration. And the overview effect has given us three particular benefits. One, it's the truth, tells us the truth. We're on a spaceship moving through the universe. And we're all in this together on this spaceship. There's no lifeboat. Secondly, love. Many astronauts have now reported to me they cried when they first saw the Earth, and they came back with a love of the planet. And then third, identity shift. We go from me to we, which is what every other speaker here has talked about. So we should keep asking this question. We should keep striving to understand it better. And we should accept that the answer may always elude us. And yet, these two answers, I think, we can hold on to now in this moment, which is an inflection point where we're either going to embrace what has been called a calling, or we're going to retreat from it. So my hope is that we will embrace it. And even though we may not always be able to give the answers that other people want, I hope we'll trust our own experience, trust the fact that in some way, the universe is actually calling us to fulfill a destiny we cannot fully define. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. And another amen for that, Frank. So, Frank, I want to, beautifully stated, as usual. You know, you've been at this for over 40 years. I know Rick has also. You know, I'm curious how you've seen this movement or understanding or coming to understand this perspective has changed over the years. And you know, what the difference is between now and maybe when you first started, you know, sharing these views. And then Rick or Loretta, you could chime in on this question. I'm curious of the evolution of how people are perceiving this calling, and if you have a sense of that it's increasing.
There are two major changes for me personally. One is the overview effect. The book came out in 1987, and we're going to be celebrating the 5th edition and, the 40th anniversary of the book in 2027. The biggest changes is that the overview effect, which is really a message from the astronauts to the world. And as I always want to say, they're the heroes of the story because they risk their lives to bring this message back. This message is being accepted by more and more people. And, hundreds, thousands of books are published every year, and only a few of them have impact. And it's beyond me to really understand why the overview effect has become well known and accepted as something real and important. So that's been a big change for me.
Mm-hmm.
The other big change, and Rick and I talked about this at a conference in DC last year, we've been preaching the gospel for 40 years in the desert. And I think the gospel we've been preaching of large-scale space migration and the benefits could only be fully realized today because we now have the potential of AI-enabled robots to go with us as partners and to help us out, because we're quite fragile when we get out there, and they're not. So I think we have partners in our vision that didn't exist when Gerard K. O'Neill infected Rick and me with the virus of living off-world in large numbers.
Mm-hmm. So Rick, thank you, Frank. So Rick, you were an early space activist with I think with the L5 Society, as I was, frankly, way back in the day. Are you seeing a more receptivity to your message now than before? And how has it changed for you?
I think we've gone in waves over time. And not to get into the negative political stuff, but when when Dr. O'Neill wrote The High Frontier, we were being told the space shuttle was coming. It was going to be $50 a pound to go to space. It was going to fly, or it was going to be $100 a pound. It was going to fly 50 times a year. And if you read The High Frontier, it's a great book, but there's that sadness in there because we were being lied to, right? And it didn't happen. But it was exactly in that period where we thought it was going to happen, where like belief or disbelief was suspended for a couple of decades there, that all of the organizations you see now, and including like some kid in Florida named Jeff Bezos reading The High Frontier and all of that, it all came from then, right? Because we had this moment of disbelief, and it was like this little crack, or of belief, I'm sorry. It was the crack in the wall of disbelief. And all of us kind of came out of that. And some of us have clung to that, and some of us have enabled others and generations since then to rise through it. And I think so then it waned for a while. But I think as we're in this period of time now, where our friends who are building the rocket ships, I use the word ships because you don't throw ships away, as they are beginning to make this happen, we're coming back into the realm of it being a distinct possibility again. Now, one very important thing, we can't be depressed if it doesn't happen fast enough, he says, the guy who sometimes curls up in a ball and almost sucks his thumb because he's so depressed because nobody's getting it. It does happen. I don't really suck my thumb, but I do curl up in a ball now and then. We don't have to convince everybody. And we don't have to convince everybody first, and we don't have to convince everybody all at once. Societies aren't made like that. The new worlds of life, the new worlds of who we are, it's only a couple of people wandering out of the valley in Africa that go hit the beach and start going north, that change civilization forever. And I want to wrap up my answer with one other thing, and it's just blown me away and been in my head ever since. When I was working on the book, I really started, there's a whole thing where I track history from the first sitting on the plains of Africa to what I call the arrival of the billionaire cavalry. And there's a moment that happens around 1500 or so. And yes, you know it, but you don't really think about it. Space didn't exist. Space, this thing around us, did not exist until Copernicus and Galileo. It didn't exist. It was heaven. It was Valhalla. As a human being, a corporeal human being, you couldn't imagine going there. You had to die or do some really good organics, right? To be able to think, that you'd been to heaven. And right at that moment that happens, I'm going to get this wrong, but my good friend Phil Metzger pointed it out to me after I wrote the freaking book, which blows my mind. But that there are letters going back and forth between, I think, Tycho Brahe and Copernicus and Galileo, and they're like, yeah, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. Those guys are taking all those dangerous ships to go across the ocean. I cannot wait until we go across the peaceful void to the other worlds in the solar system. It started right then. As soon as that veil was opened, we started dreaming about it. And within a couple hundred years, and you've got Cyrano de Bergerac writing about going into space, and on, and then the technology arrives, and off we go. So out of the thousands of years, or tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of years of primate existence, it wasn't until suddenly we realized we could go that we started going. And now we're at the final step in that, where we've gone from the elites of government to the financial elites, to the moment in time where people on this call will have the chance to go to the moon or Mars or start working on an O'Neill habitat.
I love that, Rick. I love that comment because
Steve, can I add
if I may, 1 second, Courtney. So we think, those of us who've been working at this for 40 years, we feel like it's been a bit of a slog, but we just have to remember 500 years is nothing in the context of even just a human existence, never mind the existence of the world or life on Earth. And if it takes us even if it takes us another 100 years or 200 years to really take a foothold in a solar system or create new civilizations, we just have to be, we have to be compassionate with ourselves that it may take that long, but we all feel this sense of tremendous urgency, though, regardless, that we've got to, if we're gathering the technology now, we feel the sense of that we're almost there, so we just want to just push through. And I think of that guy, who was like chopping away with a sledgehammer at the Berlin Wall, just chipping away.
Yeah.
We've
But
got to
Steve,
get
Steve, you're
through
missing
this.
Steve, you're missing a piece of history, and Loretta will remember this. Frank will, Rick, huge piece of history, which is in
I'm
the
sorry.
70s and 80s. We had the Club of Rome, and you had the limits of Earth resources. So Jerry O'Neill, who actually paid my first paycheck,
Courtney, do you have your camera on? I'm sorry.
I do.
I can't find him. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Don't worry about it.
Can
Let's
you hear my
there he
voice? Hear him.
There we are.
Well, all I wanted to interject and provide context for Frank and Rick and company. Club of Rome was a major event for many of us of that generation, right, Rick? Where they said, you only have so many limited resources on Earth, and then you had Jerry O'Neill and others, but particularly Jerry, who said, no, you've got the infinite world of cosmos, and here are building blocks. And that had a huge, huge impact on many of us. So, Rick, I just wanted to interject that just as a reminder of fitting O'Neill into the historical context.
And thank you, Courtney. And I was gonna call on you. Really, there's some great questions in the chat field. Keep them coming. But I want to bring this down and. Meaning, again, coming down from the mountaintop, if you will. Rick represents more than anyone the mountaintop, and certainly Frank. But you're the one, talk about block and tackle, what's your message in terms of people who might be being inspired by these messages? And how do we translate that into real action? Because, it's one thing having a feeling, but it's another thing actually making things happen. Do you have a sense of that?
Well, if we did nothing, we didn't exist. And these organizations, for better or for worse, you have national security imperatives. So you have the world's military, China, US, Russia, others, that are galvanizing robotically and even to some extent crude, looking at the ultimate high frontier from a national security standpoint. So lots of money, lots of technology being poured into it. Secondly, in my world, of the commercial world, in a world that a number of you, Rick, and certainly Loretta, are very intimately familiar with, there is a tremendous amount going on to take advantage of the high frontier from a commercial standpoint, resource extraction, energy from the sun, asteroid mining potential over time, taking advantage of microgravity for biomedical and endless number of potential products and so forth. Obviously, telecommunications, imagery, and so forth. So, to one of the questions about what's the practical effect? As we speak, people are benefiting either knowingly or unknowingly. If you extracted the geospatial GPS system, the global positioning system, for example, and it's European and Chinese and to some extent the Russian GLONASS, your digital economy collapses, as an example. We now have India, some parts of Africa, parts of South America that are realizing that the club has been blown wide open. It's no longer just US and Russia, obviously. China is significant. And China's been very, very clever at levering and bringing a number of those countries into their particular coalition. We're trying to do our best alliance-wise. So there's a huge dynamic out there. I think where we play a role, we the community, is making our voices heard, vis-a-vis what you've heard from Samantha and Loretta, Frank, and everybody, Rick. Where the concerns are. Are we going too much on the military? Are we underplay on the colonial side? Are we going to end up with Western imperialism replayed? I know Global South is not exactly the politically correct expression, but if I can get away with it for a moment, folks that have been in that sort of developing frame that are coming into their own, if you will, are not going to just sit by, them and watch the U.S. and our Western allies harvest the resources up there. So we have to figure out how we can establish these alliances. So there are these imperatives that are happening. And the question from our community at large, and those of you in the chat and others listening, is how do you shape and drive so that we get the sort of ideal? Maybe we never give up our ideals in terms of global harmony. Even a cynic like me understands that we need to do certain things. One very quick comment on the Chinese.
If I could, why don't we hold that? Because I do think that gets to cooperation versus competition.
Yeah. Okay. Happy to talk about that.
But I do want to bring Loretta back in the conversation here because your book, The New Right Stuff, is about building people's ability to address big issues, right? So tell us your view on this in terms of empowering people to take action, whether it's to be part of the space community or not. I think that you bring much to that discussion, Loretta.
Thanks. There was a great talk by Dr. Mariba Jah, University of Texas at Austin, and he was talking about space debris. He's an expert in space debris, and people were really worried about it, and they're like, this is a problem. We need to make sure we don't hit her anyway. And so somebody raised their hand. They said, Dr. Shaw, what can we do about it? What can we do about space debris? How can we help solve this problem that's affecting all of our space assets? And I was just really stunned by Moriba's answer. It's really beautiful. He said, the best thing you can do is to work on yourself. He said, a lot of these problems that we're dealing with in the world, They come from us having like a hole in our heart that we're trying to fill with achievement or recognition or success or alcohol or whatever else we try to do to cover up our pain. And all of us are doing that. I'm doing this, all the way up the chain. And so he said, like, the best thing you can do as an individual is to heal your own heart, and work on that. And that's what the book's about. It's about going on your own hero's journey and learning to heal the relationships in your life that have gone cold, and deal with heal conflicts, and build up your own confidence in who you are, and so you can be freed up to fulfill the role you came to Earth to play. We talk about having a calling. I also think not only are we like all called to space, but each of us has an individual role to play. We have like your mission, your job, what you're uniquely here to do. And so I believe in this book is about like helping you on your healing journey so that you could be freed up from all that need to go and just wail and play full out and do what you came here to do, and just have fun and be joyous and connected in love.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Thank you. And actually, I think that's a good way to bring back in, let's see, Samantha. I imagine what Loretta just said is resonating with you, and like your take on that. And I want to get a little bit into this. People are mentioning, I want to get back to Courtney teed up sort of China and the sort of global competition that we're in. How does that fit? And now we want to move into in the time we have left, talk a little bit. You had mentioned early on is, how do we work together? And I think that might be a nice way to sort of open up a conversation about, we as a species rather than we as the United States versus China conversation. Get it right as we move into space.
Thank you, Steve. And Loretta, I had the privilege to do the Space Kind course and level 1 and 2, and I highly recommend it to everyone, no matter where you're at in your life, because it really is about conscious leader transformation. And I feel like true leaders are able to create leaders. I believe everyone is intrinsically a leader. There's no followers. The whole irony of this thing of like space exploration is the whole imploration journey, which is really a leadership journey, an inner leadership and a self-mastery journey of oneself. And, the whole comment and quote was by Einstein, two things infinite, the universe and human stupidity, not quite sure about the universe. I love the idea of wonder. And Rick, I love your book as well. And Frank, I just want to pay it forward to you, the overview effect. It's the most beautiful way to articulate this kind of almost like Christos consciousness, but it's like no religion. It's just this idea that we're all humans on spaceship Earth. We're all interconnected. It's the transition from the I to the we, and it's a consciousness expansion. And I really feel like, to be able to be pioneers of tomorrow, we need to have that fundamental awareness that how we act and how we react, and even as Sadhguru talks about responsibility, it's our ability to respond. When we're in these like very complicated, high complex situations, challenging environments, that we can maintain our sense of inner peace and sovereignty over self. And there's this transition happening from scarcity thinking to abundance, and fear to love. I've grown up consuming a lot of content, of course, and fiction, and showing my age, I grew up with the Hunger Games franchise and Divergent series, and they were all dystopian futures. So part of that pain point, right? And I saw the movie, was it Tomorrowland by Disney? And I like the general idea, the main character, Casey, she puts up her hand in a classroom where the teachers are like, and the world's going to end, and this, and climate change, and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, how can we fix it? And it's simple, but it's powerful, because when you get into the science of quantum physics, our thoughts, like Nikola Tesla, energy, frequency, vibration, create our reality. And I can attest to that. To share a personal anecdote, during lockdown, I wrote the science fiction story, and my character ends up on the moon. Fast forward to now, and the beautiful nature of this community, of everyone paying it forward, and why we're all attracted to space, is I've met people that are supporting this story going to the moon next year now, as part of Astrobotics Griffin Lander mission. So in a way, I might not go to the moon, but the essence of the story, the love frequency, if it lands, it's preserved. And that's a really beautiful thing, and we shouldn't overlook it. And like even characters in my story, I had Galileo, who was Vinci's robot companion in the cosmos, and I'm now connected in the space industry to the Galileo project and Avi Loeb, and just hearing everyone's diverse perspectives about what's going on on our planet and beyond. And the truth is that love is the frequency that connects us all. And to answer your question, Steve, we do have borders, but then when you see, as Frank says, overview effect, really are there borders? And so we should go from competition, I feel, to marveling and celebrating the true pioneering, the true frontier, which is the human spirit, overcoming adversity and challenges, and celebrate that as a human species. And to Rick's question, are we alone or not? I mean, we don't know, or maybe we do, or we don't. But the point is, the true point is about the fulfillment of human potential. And I believe the fulfillment of human potential is also to be in the service of others, which is why I also had a character in my story who's like this cheeky maverick sort of character called Saint Piff, but Piff for pay it forward. I'd love to create a foundation one day, paying it forward, but we're already seeing that, people doing that in the space industry. And so I'm very honored to be here and to learn from everybody in their diverse perspectives. And also children, by the way, oh my goodness, when they come to this planet, like they see limitless thinking. They're just like, yeah, we're one human family, right? Like it's so obvious. And I think if I'm to contribute any perspective here to this very esteemed conversation, it's to honor the childlike spirit within us all. There's a difference between childlike and childish, as I've said. Childlike is the wonder, childish is not responsible, and carrying that forward, carrying that torch forward, and being role models for our children or future generations of humans. They need to look back at us and see the human spirit.
Thank you for that. Thank you for Samantha. You're really echoing what Loretta's saying. I do want to bring in Frank, and again, it's Loretta and Samantha's are bringing up this notion that we're in this the arc of human existence is very long, right? So we happen to be in a period right now of geopolitical competition with China. But how do we frame this in such a way that we can kind of come out as a species, if you will, in a way that benefits everyone here and benefits the future? And I just want to sort of engage a little bit in understanding that there are political realities that we have to deal with. But how do we manage that at the same time keeping a broader perspective? Frank, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think we can speak to that directly in the whole idea of the United States and China in a so-called race to the moon, another space race. It's being discussed in that way because, unfortunately, the overview effect has not penetrated enough consciousness yet. So we're falling back on old paradigms. However, there is an answer, Steve, and it was provided back in the 1960s by John F. Kennedy. At that time, we considered the space race with the Soviet Union to be an existential threat to the United States. what many people don't know is that John F. Kennedy took a two-tiered approach to the space race. And he started talking to Nikita Khrushchev very early on. And he was saying, Nikita, let's don't make Apollo a competitive race. Why don't we go together? And Khrushchev said, Niet, we're way ahead of you. Why would we do that? The United States started catching up, and then we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. And for those of you who are too young to have experienced it, many of us thought that was the end of the world. And after that, the Soviets were more open to it. But Kennedy made it clear to a congressperson who opposed what he was doing. He said it's going to be on two tracks. If they want to compete, we're going to win. But we're going to continuously invite them to go to the moon with us. And 2 months before he died, he said that at the UN, we should go to the moon together. And in fact, why don't all the countries of the world join us?
Mm-hmm.
The President of the United States today has the option to do exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, compete if that's what the Chinese want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Cooperate if possible.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a way to recognize reality and also to hold a higher vision.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you in the policy world, I wish you would attempt to get this idea out there because it could change the future of the world.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Frank. I realize that we are already we're almost at the end of our time, and it's gone by so fast. I do want to give the each of our speakers a 1 minute opportunity to share with you their takeaway, what they would like you most to take away from this conversation. And Frank, since I have you, why don't we go in reverse order from the last meeting? So Frank, I'll let you start that, and we'll proceed from there. Frank.
Thank you, Steve. What I take away from listening to all my colleagues here is that the answer to the question, why space, is beyond words. And yet we as evangelists must do our best to put it into words in order to share it with everyone else on Spaceship Earth.
Excellent. So Rick, what are your closing thoughts for us today?
There's no space race. There's the human race. This thing together, right? The space race is a construct. I got to tell you, it's just total fiction. Jeff, Elon, everybody probably on this call who believes in this, all the entrepreneurs I know, every startup person, all the investors I know, they are not freaking racing with anybody. They are aspiring to achieve the dream and the goal that we all share. And yes, some of them want to make some money. Great. Let's do that. That's a construct. The really important thing to understand is that we can go out into the universe with love, curiosity, hope, led by science, and do incredible things. But this whole race thing, let's just forget that, right? I want to lock China and the US up in a moon base and then let everybody else. Because we keep thinking in the 60s mode, like there's the government over here and the government over here. It's not the case anymore. Many of the people on this call have companies and all of this. And by the way, they all work across borders. They do amazing things together. So let's just go out there and do it and realize this incredible dream.
Thank you, Rick. That's excellent. Yeah, no, such an important message on so many levels. So thank you. And let me see. So Courtney, your closing thoughts.
Yeah, just building on what Rick was saying, the Chinese do not view this as a race. The United States can plant their men and women on the moon tomorrow, and Xi would not lose a minute of sleep over it. They do not view it as a race. None of their white papers, none of their strategic thinking. They're looking at it as a permanent residence habitation in space. They see tremendous, obviously, national security, but also tremendous economic possibilities. I was about to say earlier, before I was rudely interrupted, Steve, I'm kidding, that there are some fundamental reasons for cooperation, not the least of which is a mundane matter called pressurization. We use different PSIs with our suits, our spacecraft. So when we have the inevitable rescue scenario with a taikonaut, astronaut, cosmonaut, Indian, Japanese, we cannot afford to spend the hours leveling the pressurization. So at a very technical level, there are a number, I just gave you one random example, where we need to have very strong cooperation with our fellow humans. And to to Rick's point, from his lips to God's ears, I mean, I couldn't agree more with him. And hope and pray that, we all of us try to push the message that everybody here, including Frank, has emphasized about the need for cooperation versus turning it into a race. But on the other hand, that we can't dismiss the Chinese from a national security standpoint. On the other hand, I come from the Vietnam era, so I grew up when we had weapons and aerospace manufacturers using the race, using the threat for profiteering. So I'm always skeptical about the extent to which there's a race versus whatever. But I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you, Courtney, for always really grounding the conversation in kind of the reality of what's happening. So that's so important. Loretta, your voice is so important. What message do you want to leave this community with today?
Yes. If anyone's ever watched an episode of The Expanse, which is a sci-fi TV show, that one of the things that's always painful about it for me is, it's this, 100 years out future or whatever. And there's people, fulfilling all of our wildest dreams. We've got, a million people living and working in space. We're harvesting resources from the asteroid belt. All the things we are fighting for and working our fingers to the bone and giving up precious time with our families to make happen. And the outcome in the show is that Mars declares war on Earth. And I just think, oh my gosh, is that what we're all working so hard for? Is that the goal? The goal is to make interstellar war possible. Yay! Interplanetary, excuse my slip of the tongue. No, so I'm really passionate. Like that's not the future that's not the vision. That's not what we want. That's not the goal. So we got to be careful what we're aiming for. Like, be really clear what you say you want. It's more than being just having a million people out in space, more than just having people on Mars. It's doing it in a way that works for everyone with nobody left out, and in a way that really is inspiring, that really brings us together, really is exciting. So the closing message is, as you guys were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to learn Chinese. Which I think it's not going to happen, but luckily I think the technology will come in handy with that. I think there'll be, like my Babelfish, where I could just, be able to speak to somebody. So the language barrier is going to be going away technologically very soon, but there's still a cultural barrier. We don't talk to the Chinese. We even have like legal barriers. Like, you cannot work in the space industry with the Chinese. So, but I run a World Space Party. And so, like, hey, there's no IP to worry about, there's no ITAR, to worry about, what I'm talking about is like, let's make human connections, like International Space University. Like, let's go meet our counterparts in China. Let's connect with them on a human level. Let's break bread. Let's meet their kids. Let's build that trust that I was talking about across the borders. And to Courtney's point, I think that's brilliant. Like, if my stuff goes down on the moon, I need it to be able to plug into wherever it needs to plug into. I don't care whose space it is. We need to do this together, and we need to do it in a very human way. And so, like, at our level, like, let's do make the human bridges. Let's host a dinner, bring someone over, send some kids over, whatever we need to do. We need to build the human ties at the human level. The governments are going to do what the governments are going to do. But we can still do what we can do. And I think that's important, and we're good at that. So let's go.
That's beautiful, Loretta. Thank you for that. And finally, Samantha, a few words, closing words for you of what you think is an important takeaway that you want to leave folks with.
Wow, it's like we were saying, it's so hard to bring into words. I feel like we're just like, it's such an exciting time, even though it's a daunting time, as a human species, what we're encountering right now, but it's just this expansion in awareness and also potential, whether it's technologically or spiritually beyond. It's just really hard to capture that, but our role is to create a sacred space for this, and that is on an individual level, on a one-to-one level, community level. It all has meaning, it all has power, and it's almost like metaphorically, the universe it's like, another test for us as a human species. Like, can we get along as one human family on spaceship Earth and respect all the different cultures and diversities and ancestral lines, and unite on this bigger mission, bigger than ourselves. It's almost like the world's having a test in ego right now. And it's like, it's about us being humble. Like, even as Carl Sagan was saying, the pale blue dot, like, it's everything but nothing at the same time. Like, it's so hard to put into words. Like, we are almost like fractals in a way of this source consciousness, or however you interpret it. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, but it's as Rick was saying, it's deep respect and reverence for all sentient life, or all life, how you define it's another conversation. But we've got human intelligence, we've got nature intelligence, Mother Gaia. I mean, AI is a whole other story, artificial intelligence, but we're like these parents in a way. So it's about being a conscious parent of our AI children as it goes off into the cosmos, plus any other intelligence that's undefined. But, it's seeing beyond the illusion of things, seeing beyond the separateness, and that every small action or inaction has an opposite effect, like a butterfly effect. So if you're still breathing here on planet Earth right now, your mission is not yet complete. And if you don't know what your mission is, that's okay too, because it will unfold and unravel beautifully over time, even though, is there such thing as time? Another conversation. But, also learn from our children. I would say that. Even if you don't have children, learn from the children. I just want to give a voice there to just fresh out of the oven. Those souls that just come here to the planet, and it's the combination of the divine feminine masculine energy within us all, the sacred protectors, as you would say, Steve, and inventors and builders, the pragmatics that, get it done, but also having the intuition and the creative, the collaborative energy that's associated with feminine energies, which is within us all. So it's an exciting time. And I choose to be a pragmatic optimist, and I choose to carry that torch forward, because we need that now in this world where they are broadcasting fear. And that is not the solution. And so the solution starts from within. The true war beyond the space arms race, whatever race war, is a war on consciousness and a war on frequency. So elevate your frequency, get above the shame, the anger, the guilt. There's a whole spectrum. Operate, from a love all the way up to a joy and enlightenment, frequency. And that can start as soon as we're born.
Wow. That is a wonderful, wonderful way of concluding this. Thank you so much, Samantha. That was beautiful. All of the group here, everyone here on this program has just been fantastic. I think my biggest takeaway is that I did not, we could have gone on for another hour and a half, 2 hours, because there's so much that these individuals have to share. Every opportunity that you have to be in their presence, I encourage you to do so. Thank you for just a little bit of your time and sharing of your wisdom, each one of you. And I look forward to engaging with you more from now into the future. Thank you so much. That concludes our program for the day. Thank you for those for staying longer. It looks like we went over almost 10 minutes, so do apologize for your schedules, but look forward to your further participation. I put the I put the link to the Beyond Earth Symposium, which is coming up February 24th and 25th, in the chat field. Please download that link and join us in February. We'd love to see you. And with that, I will conclude this call, and thanks everyone for being here. And we'll see you again next time.
Beyond Earth is committed to the true purpose of why we go to space. Join us on this journey.